In this video, I'm going to give an immediate response to the news that I woke up to this morning that President Joe Biden overnight pardoned his son, Hunter Biden. In a statement, Biden said he would grant clemency, quote, for those offences against the United States which he has committed or may have committed or taken part in during the period from January 1st, 2014 through December 1st, 2024. So that is not only offences for which he has been prosecuted and found guilty, but any other potential offences committed during that period. This is the thing that Joe Biden had said repeatedly, and his team had said repeatedly he would not do. Just after the conviction, he had said, I will accept the outcome of this case and will continue to respect the judicial process. At the G7 summit in June this year, he reaffirmed it like this. I said I'd abide by the jury decision. I will do that. The White House press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, scolded journalists for even asking the question, saying that the answer was no and just stop questioning it. After all, this was at the centre of the Democrats' case against Trump. Politics as usual, went the claim, was that there was proper judicial independence, proper due process. That was the principle on which Biden had made all those previous statements. The president had to respect the rule of law, nobody was beyond the law, and so on. While it was clear that Democrat-motivated prosecutors were pursuing Trump, as we've discussed before numerous times, the evidence suggests that Joe Biden had not been directly involved in initiating or pursuing those actions. So while I criticised the lawfare against Trump on this channel, because I try to be consistent, you could still make the case that some lines had been preserved. Well, for all that, according to the New York Times, Justice Department officials speaking to them anonymously have confirmed that they had long been expecting and reportedly dreading exactly this move. So while Joe Biden was making those promises over and over again, those close to the case clearly didn't believe it for 1 minute. And now it turns out that they were right not to. Joe Biden is not the first president to pardon a family member. Bill Clinton pardoned his brother Roger on old drug charges. Trump pardoned the father of his son-in-law, Jared Kushner. But in both of those cases, the prison time had already been served. It was an act of forgiveness, not an avoidance of justice per se. Personally, I still think it's pretty corrupt. I tend to think basic frameworks of conflict of interest should apply in any such cases. Alexis Coe, the author of a biography of George Washington, told CNN this, I can guarantee you that when the framers debated the presidential pardon at the Constitutional Convention, a future in which it would be used as a get-out-of-jail-free card for the first family was not among their concerns. It is supposed to inspire unity and justice, in other words, to be a last resort for people who had been failed by the system. Instead, it has now become a perk of the job, special justice, depending on who you are and who you know, not equal before the law. And I guess Joe Biden feels that if he's going to get the blame from everyone for the election being lost, if those arguments for a higher standard were put before the electorate and were rejected, then what the hell, he might as well do his family a service and take the criticism, because what does he have to lose? It is the reasoning of a weak president, someone for whom the rhetoric was a public position, not a basic principle of conduct. The Trump supporters don't, of course, have much of a leg to stand on when it comes to criticising this on the basic moral grounds that I highlighted, the conflict of interest case, because Their man has done similar things. Trump pardoned a long list of political allies, including his former campaign manager, Paul Manafort, and his former aide, Stephen Bannon, and is promising to pardon others in the future based on his relationship to them. I aim to be consistent, so I will criticise those if and when they come. That's for the future. But of course, Trump supporters can, and as you would expect are, point to the hypocrisy. The fact that Biden made the case for higher standards in office and then immediately showed that his commitment to them was skin deep. The fact that he promised over and over again to respect the decision of the courts and then did the exact opposite. And in doing so, he made the same argument that Trump has been making, and which his side had up until now been dismissing. He argued that Hunter Biden had been singled out because of the fact that he was the son of the sitting president. Now, first of all, is he right? I would hold to the consistent position that using the courts for political vendettas is morally wrong as well as incredibly bad for American democracy. But you still have to make the judgment as to whether that is actually what just happened. As you know, I've been pretty clear about what happened with the cases against Trump. If the only case that had been brought against him had been the classified documents case, where he had actively sought to frustrate the recovery of the documents, and especially if that case had been brought in a timely manner, it would have been much harder for him to argue that political warfare was being waged against him, although doubtless he would have tried. But instead, we got the rash of cases, the earliest of which to go to trial was the appalling, terrible New York hush money case, which could easily have been thrown out on appeal if it had been allowed to get to appeal, and probably should have been. This was a case, remember, that covered a federal potential crime, but had been rejected by federal prosecutors at the Southern District of New York in the previous years. The previous Manhattan DA had not prosecuted it and had referred to the star witness, Michael Cohen, as, quote, more than a problematic witness. The former Assistant U.S. Attorney Ellie Honig described the convoluted process that had to be undertaken to turn this into the case that it was. He said this: the DA took one expired state-level misdemeanor, stacked another expired state-level misdemeanor on top of that, and then piled the federal campaign finance violation on top of that, and presto, an actual state-level felony. Those misdemeanors alone would have been unactionable because the window for taking action on them had expired. Only by magically turning them into a felony was it possible. But even then, as Honig added, no other state prosecutor anywhere ever has charged a federal campaign finance crime in state court. So yes, even a number of liberal justices and legal campaigners were acknowledging that reality at the time and bemoaning that this case was poisoning the well for the one or two that they believed to have more merit. Was Hunter Biden's case in the same vein? Well, hardly. I mean, look, Biden as a father could certainly have complained about how his political opponents had gone after his son, had spread the most degraded and the most humiliating material far and wide in an attempt to get at him. That much is, of course, absolutely true. Although, to be fair, the family of politicians have always been more highly exposed when they go off the rails. So while I think it's regrettable, it's not unique to Hunter's position. But that wasn't even the whole story, was it? Because unlike many of those family members of other figures, Hunter Biden had been using his father's name to get himself onto the boards of companies that he would never have gotten close to without that sort of a connection. So If you benefit in that very direct way, well, you get the accumulated risk that comes along with it. But that's all by the by. The real question is whether the judicial process was affected by the political background noise. Joe Biden claims that it was. He said this: "No reasonable person who looks at the facts of Hunter's cases can reach any other conclusion than Hunter was singled out only because he is my son." But unlike the Trump hush money case, where literally a case of its kind had never been brought ever against anyone not named Donald Trump, that's just not true in this case. Hunter Biden was convicted on 3 federal felony counts for illegally buying a gun, lying about his drug addiction on a federal form. Now, it was only a first offence. The weapon hadn't been used for a violent crime, so legal analysts said it was likely he'd receive 1 year or less jail time, if that. In addition, he had pleaded guilty to 9 federal tax charges in Los Angeles. To say that Hunter Biden might have escaped prosecution if he hadn't been the subject of so much scrutiny, well, that might be true. It's unprovable and something of a boo-hoo, poor you moment. Because, again, if you get to enrich yourself by trading off your closeness to a public figure, then you reap that particular whirlwind as well. Yes, people are going to pay you more attention. The fact is that the crimes are ones that are routinely prosecuted in the United States. They were undisputably committed. The sentencing hadn't yet been carried out, but there's no reason to think it would have been unduly harsh because of any political factors. So it's hard to see this move by Joe Biden as anything other than a disreputable end to his time in office, one that he's decided he simply doesn't care anymore about how it looks, and all his former statements of fine principle don't matter as much as his family connections. At least some Democrat politicians were prepared to call it out. So Jared Polis, the Democratic governor of Colorado, wrote this: "While as a father, I certainly understand President Joe Biden's natural desire to help his son by pardoning him, I am disappointed that he put his family ahead of the country. This is a bad precedent that could be abused by later presidents and will sadly tarnish his reputation." Greg Stanton, a House Democrat from Arizona, said, "I respect President Biden, but I think he got this one wrong. This wasn't a politically motivated prosecution. Hunter committed felonies and was convicted by a jury of his peers." This all comes as we had the news that Trump has named another of his loyalists, Kash Patel, to the post of FBI director. This has now put in people who have stated that they would go after Trump's enemies into a number of key positions that, if they do the worst of what they have apparently promised to do, would be another major escalation in the dismal decline of American democratic standards. Now, we're not going to complain about that until it actually happens, because lots of stories about this could happen, that could happen, that could happen. Well, maybe none of it could happen. So let's focus on what gets done, not what gets speculated. But I will, on this channel, continue aiming to be an advocate for high standards, for respecting the rule of law and for basic democratic principles, since neither political party now seems willing to uphold such standards, and since the partisan supporters of both sides generally excuse their own side's lapses while pointing to the failings of the other side, I have to believe that there's some value in having a voice here that at least aims to be consistent. No human beings can be 100% consistent, but aims to be consistent even when it doesn't play to the algorithms. Because whatever happens in the next 4 years, there's going to be furious claims and counterclaims flying all over the place. So We will see if we can keep a cool head and just keep applying the same rules to everyone and the same expectations that maybe we could behave with a bit more dignity to everyone as well.